Jamie, my great hope was that we would be doing this pod in a very celebratory, uplifting mood, maybe throwing some chatter about suds, both in the city of Philadelphia and the suburbs. But here we are trying to clean up game 4, different twists and turns in a couple of ways. What was the tone like on the show this morning?
People weren't freaking out, which was good to see. I think I always said this was going to be a 5-game series. When you're up against the likes of a Bradley Beal or Russell Westbrook, you want to give them the respect of them being able to steal a game, which I thought they would. I didn't think it was going to come in the fashion it did last night, meaning Joel Embiid leaves injured, Ben Simmons gets in foul problems, and they're able to just key in on Tobias and make his life hell. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is, and I think most people recognize that, and there was a calmness. People weren't freaking out and calling for Ben Simmons' head or freaking out, calling Joel Embiid soft, whereas, if this happened in the bubble last year, people were on edge. So at least being a 1 seed with home court advantage, I think people realize, all right, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and one loss ultimately isn't the end of the world. So it was fairly calm considering.
That's heartening. That's very reassuring. I feel like
it was
it was
good.
a sign of growth among the
Yeah, let's hope so. But yeah, I mean, look, if you lose that game and you didn't have the sense that this team is, real deal in years past, you're probably a little more on edge than you are. I think there's a sense behind everything that this is a championship caliber team and they'll right the ship. So I think that gives the majority of fans a sense of calmness.
I was going to bring this up later, but we can just get into it right now. That has to do with how they played the first 3 games, right? I mean, essentially after the first half of game 1, after that, there was nothing Washington showed that it was capable of doing. Switch up the starting lineup, mix up your defensive coverages. Nothing they seemed to do was working. And I thought that really midway through the second half in game 3 on Saturday, it just seemed like the Sixers completely broke their will. And then like Scott Brooks is coming out after the game and crowning the Sixers, saying they're championship ready. And I was like, wow, this thing is done. It's over. And the way the first 6 minutes and change played out on Monday, it seemed like we were headed that way again when the Sixers were up double figures. Matisse has that big dunk, and you're like, all right, here we go. And then a minute after that, Joe has his fall, plays a little bit more, but then he ultimately comes out after the first quarter.
Yeah, I mean, nobody would have predicted had Joel Embiid, stayed in that game that Washington was gonna pull that out. And look, if you're looking for the positives last night, they almost stole one with Ben Simmons, being in foul trouble a lot of the game and Joel Embiid missing 3/4 of the game. I mean, between Furkan and Maxey, they almost stole one from them when they shouldn't have, really. And like, to me, I look at that as a big positive and the caliber of this team and this roster, that even when, the deck was stacked against you last night, they still were in a position to win the game, which is, to me, a really good sign moving forward. You don't want it to be a cakewalk entirely to the Eastern Conference Finals, in my opinion. You do want to get challenged and see what you're made of, so that when you do get into a 6 or 7 game, battle series, you can fall back on, all right, we've been here. We know what to do now. So I look at the positives from last night too.
To me, one of the most encouraging signs about this team in the regular season was that they consistently showed that they could figure out how to win games. It wasn't always pretty, but if you looked at those clutch game stats, whatever, the Sixers won the most of those games in the league, and they just kept on finding different ways to pull out games. So I think, right, regular season they had their mettle tested, but the game on Monday, certainly even more so than the first half in game 1, I thought really it's going to set up a scenario where now we see how the Sixers respond. And I don't want to say gut check because they're up 3-1 in a series. We're not quite at that point yet. It's a 1-8 matchup. But still, that was a punch. Washington landed a punch, for its first really good punch of the series.
Yeah, I mean, you look back through the regular season, and this is a credit to Doc Rivers, going to Tyrese Maxey, who's earned it, by the way. It's not like he just pulled a guy off the bench and said, get in there, kid. There were moments in the regular season where Doc showed you he would take it kind of game by game and not have a broad view of this. I think last night he had the broad view of, let me keep Ben Simmons in the game when Scott Brooks did what he did, and see if he can shoot his way out of this. I think Doc is the perfect guy for this team right now. He's like the perfect guy at the perfect time. He understands the longevity of a playoff series. the longevity of a playoff run in total. So I think last night was all right, you guys got your one, and he'll have them focused, entering a full capacity crowd in a closeout game at home. Yeah, I still think the series is very much over.
It's funny that you brought that up because one thing that stuck with me after watching the end of the game was seeing Doc walk off the floor, and he went over to Scott Brooks, and it almost, if you removed context and just looked at it in a vacuum, it was almost like the handshake at the end of a series, like, hey, guys, this was great. Enjoy your off season. Because, they were like exchanging some smiles, dabbing up. And then, like Doc kind of walked off the court and he did some pleasant waves. He didn't seem like he was sweating it one bit.
No, I don't think Doc's worried. There was a cryptic Daryl Morey tweet last night, and I think Joel Embiid's going to be just fine. So I think in the back of Doc's mind, he's just going, all right, thanks for the motivation to kill you guys in Game 5. Thanks for putting a bullet in our chamber and not making this easy on us. All right, thanks, Scott. See you later, buddy.
So as for what changed, we know Joel Embiid with the injury. To give Washington some credit, I thought Robin Lopez mixed things up a little bit. He had that nice run in the first half, and then to close things out, Rui Hachimura, it wasn't a one-man show from him, but he reaped the benefit of what else was happening out there with the dunk and then the three-pointer to pretty much put it away.
Yeah, I don't know for sure because I wasn't following their game logs religiously this year. I would have to think that was his best game from three-point land, probably as a pro. And, these things happen. It is what it is. Robin Lopez, though, that might be the ugliest, most efficient shot in NBA history. That is a hideous hook shot. But, man, it seemed that everyone fell in last night. What do you have, 16 points in 18 minutes or something like that? Just, again, if you're going to lose a game to Robin Lopez and Hachimura, you're like, all right, it is what it is. That's our loss. Now let's take care of business Game 5.
It's almost like when you look at how the Sixers dominated the first 2.5 games of the series, there was a formula and a method to that. And to me, what I always thought about Washington was, especially after, maybe the first 6 quarters in the series, was they're going to need guys to really play above themselves. Like they'll need Hachimura to have a game like that. They're going to need some wonky stuff from Lopez every now and then, or Westbrook to have a super efficient night to steal some of these games. Whereas it's like it would take them, guys playing above their level, to win a game. Whereas the Sixers, they can be the best versions of themselves, maybe not even the best version of themselves, and still have enough to get by.
Yeah, and on the counter of that, Beal and Westbrook had their probably worst game. So if Hachimura and Lopez weren't giving you that last night, I don't think they win that game. And Beal and Westbrook probably aren't going to have as off nights again. But then I don't think the Lopez and Hachimura are going to be having those nights if those two are off. So it's they got what they needed last night from some reserves in a big way, because Russell Westbrook, I don't think he could have thrown the ball in the ocean last night anywhere outside of 5 feet from the rim.
The Atlantic and Pacific both.
Allah said it on the broadcast last night. Yeah, he can take that shot every day of the week, 10 out of 10 times. If he wants to pull up for three-pointers, let him.
So I would have felt, I think, a little bit different about this game, to follow up on something that you mentioned earlier, had we not saw what we saw from Furkan Korkmaz and especially Tyrese Maxey. We can go in chronological order first, talking about the fourth quarter. Furk comes out there and bang, he has an immediate impact, which they'll need him at different points of a series in a game to change the pace. Like last night, like he and Maxey positioned the team to possibly steal the game. And then Maxey, if the Sixers lost Game 4, which they did, okay. But to me, bigger picture, that showed a lot about what Tyrese is made of. Playoff game, get in there, mix things up, knock down a couple threes. Thought he had a great, great game.
And his block on Westbrook was a veteran type of move, not only to go straight up and down, but to time the block as he was extending. I said it before on the air. If March Madness happened last year, I don't think Tyrese Maxey is falling to pick number 21. The kid's a gamer. These Kentucky kids are gamers. They show up. No spotlight is too bright for them. They show up and they ball. And Tyrese Maxey is a gamer. And to see this is a really encouraging sign, not only for this year, but for the future. If he can be – look, Shake Milton probably should be a little worried that Tyrese Maxey's playing as well as he is, because he's eating right into those minutes. the kid's been phenomenal. Doc gave him a long leash in those final, 15 games of the year, and the kid earned it. I mean, he straight up earned playoff minutes, which if you had asked me 3 months ago, I would have said, you're kind of crazy. He's not there yet. He's a rookie. You can't rely on him. Nope. He shut me up last night. He's earned those minutes, and he's excelling in them.
Yeah, I give him credit because there was a time where you weren't seeing him at all out there in the mid stage of the regular season.
And to that, he probably never hit the true rookie wall that a lot of guys do because he was a little more preserved and rested. So it's not like he had to I think Matisse hit that wall a little bit his first year where you kind of saw the legs get a little heavier. Tyrese, not only is he apparently one of the hardest workers in the gym, he's got fresh legs on top of it for the most part, and that's a big benefit.
Yeah, and I'm with you. The defense between the block, the steal into the run-out jam, so great to see.
He's fun. He's a fun kid to watch play. And I think the team feeds off of him. The home crowd definitely feeds off of him. He brings an instant energy to the floor, and it's contagious out there amongst the five guys.
Especially this time of year, too. Like, if you get settled into a half-court game, you sometimes need a guy like that with some bounce who can break it down, get in there.
I mean, Doc had Lou Williams for all those years out there, and he's that instant energy. You don't need the defense. If you get that, that's a huge bonus. But if you can attack, and create, that's your job. And dive for some loose balls, bring that energy, and this kid's got it.
As we move along, we head to Game 5 at the Center on Wednesday. Want to play some sound? All right, so do we agree if the Sixers, Jay, are the best version of themselves, with or without Joel Embiid, they can still get this done in Game 5?
Yeah, I think it's easier to game plan in a game when you lose a Joel Embiid you weren't expecting to lose than it is to game plan against a team that knows they don't have him. So I think the Wizards benefited from, all right, well, we didn't expect Joel Embiid out, so let's double Tobias Harris every time he steps foot in the lane. The spacing issues arose in game. Now Doc and his staff, which is a great staff, have time to prepare in case he's not going to be there, and they can game plan and attack it a little differently. It's a little harder in game like that when it's an injury. So I think even if he doesn't play, I think he will. My gut just tells me he will. I think even without him, I'm not concerned that they take care of business in Game 5.
Was there a lineup, a rotation, a grouping that you felt best about with Joel not out there, given the way Washington likes to play with speed?
Yeah, it's tough because Simmons was in foul problems. So you kind of put him down at the dunker spot and played a little small ball lineups, which creates some shot like then you're forcing Tobias to create, and they can kind of zone in on him. So I'd rather keep Simmons at the 1. Mike Scott playing the 5 isn't ideal for the playoffs. It might be there. Doc has shown you through the regular season he likes to keep Dwight with the second unit and kind of stick to his guns there. It's tough once Joel goes out like that. I might consider moving Dwight to the starting lineup, but that screams almost desperation to me when it's not a desperate situation. So I prefer Ben keeping the ball in his hands because that's where he is. He gets lost when he's not creating. And Tobias needs a little easier of a time with the spacing and the lane. So I just, as our man Devon Givens here at the station always says, an aggressive Ben's the best Ben. I just say if there's no Joel Embiid, Ben, what we saw in Game 2 is what we need tonight. Attack that lane. Don't allow them to double down on Tobias and create the perimeter shots that you're so good at creating. So I think I stick with Ben at the 1, and I guess I do roll with Mike Scott. There's not a great answer there, unfortunately.
I tend to lean to your side as well. I think that, Dwight, he's in his role. He's in his spot. There's still going to be some size. Listen, if you take Joel away, then you look at Washington's bigs, and, they've got some size there if you remove Joel from the equation. So
yeah, you see all their eyes light up last night when Joel left. Daniel Gafford was like, oh, I can attack the rim now. I can be a little more physical. I can do this. I can put back dunk. His eyes lit up big time when Joel was not there.
That was the craziest thing because of how poorly it started for both Gafford and Len.
Yeah.
Like, you're laughing because it's like, oh, Gafford, he started. He lasted 3 minutes. Len comes in. He lasted a minute before he picked up 2 first.
Yeah. So life is
Crazy.
definitely easier for those guys with no Joel Embiid. That's for sure.
Do we think, I'll say this. I think the Sixers, as far as things they can control, whether or not Joel Embiid is out there or not, tighten up that defense. That was something that Tobias spoke about as well. They gave up 21 in transition on the break to the Wizards in game 4, and that's Washington's bread and butter there. So I think, and obviously, listen, Joel's a presence there. He sometimes doesn't even really need to move that much if you put him in
Yeah.
the lane. But tighten things up on defense a little bit. I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they seem to get some second chance opportunities. I didn't look at the box score at their offensive rebounds, but Gaffer had a big putback there in the final minutes. Yeah, Embiid's presence was felt around the rim. It's just it changes the way you attack. Bradley Beal doing his push off with his left hand. We see you, Bradley. Hopefully maybe those get called, but he's able to attack the rim. It's a whole different game for him when Joel Embiid's not in the game. And if Ben Simmons isn't on him, he's going to attack with no Joel Embiid down there. So, their perimeter game wasn't working last night. So they both realized, rightly so, this is going to be easier to score around the rim for us. So, yeah, you'd like to see the defense tighten up. But I think if Embiid's out there, it automatically does. He changes everything.
Typically what we do to start a week here on the podcast is we have our Mailbag Monday. But there was a game on Monday, so we're making it the not Mailbag Monday, but Tuesday. So we had some calls come in after a dominant game 3, and I think that this is for better or worse, Jamie, the sunshine and unicorns way that I handle this content here is maybe wrapping things up on a positive note. So we'll rack some of the calls that come in. You can get in touch with us by calling the pod line at 215-403-7637, or you can hit us up with our mentions and DMs. And, of course, if you do leave a voicemail, we send you some 76ers swag.
Ah, very nice.
We try to help the people,
Yeah. I need some swag, B-Celt. Send me some. No, I'm just kidding.
We can work.
I got a swag box earlier
out.
this year from Chris Hack. I'm all good. I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah, you probably have him on direct, right? That's the guy that I get my stuff from.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go to Vinny. Vinny talked about the balance from game 3, and I thought that was one of the huge takeaways. Joel was awesome, career high in the playoffs, 36 points, but the way that Danny and Seth were cooking from the outside, it's a tough proposition to ask an opponent to slow the Sixers down when they've got everything clicking like that.
Yeah, and to his point, Seth was, I believe, 0 for 4 from deep last night. So, Danny, again, like the Joel spacing effect is incredible to watch when he's not there. Danny's shots, he hit the one off-balance corner 3 where he kind of was expecting the foul, but his life becomes tougher. Seth Curry's life becomes tougher because you can cheat out a little bit more on those guys, and those are guys that are catch and shoot thoughtless shooters. Like if they're open, boom, ball's in their hand, they're shooting it. And those just become a little tougher. It's amazing the effect that number 21 has on not only an entire game, defensively, offensively, transition, but to watch the shooters get clamped down on a little harder. It's like, wow, this guy, not to bring up the MVP discussion, Jokic is amazing. And you can make the case for probably 3 or 4 guys very easily. But to watch the Sixers without Joel Embiid, you go, oh, damn, that guy's the MVP. Because everybody's life becomes easier with him out there.
Unquestionable. No doubt about it. And I think it was encouraging to me to see the Sixers go 7-3 during that stretch in March without Joe. But, I mean, you bring up the intensity of a playoff game like what we saw in game 4. That's the real deal. And you can see what happens and how things change. Like that, to me, is more of a barometer than 10 games in the middle of the regular season when, every team is going through something.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it was game 2 where, they were doubling Joel as the ball was getting passed to him. So, like, Scott Brooks was in desperation mode in game 2 on how to control this guy. And one of the best things Doc Rivers did this year was have Joel in face up. We all used to all get frustrated by the strips from behind and the double teams where Joel wasn't seeing it. Now he's seeing it and passing out of it in an effective manner where you go, this guy's pretty much unstoppable.
Back into the pod line we go. Rita bringing up the overall strength of the 76ers roster. Let's go big picture here.
Yeah.
Removing ourselves from some of the muck and mire of game 4 and projecting out. Just tell me, man, how well positioned do you think this team is? What type of run were you expecting the team to go on heading into the playoffs?
I brought it up on air last week. I was like, I almost feel like we're offending the basketball gods because I'm just assuming Eastern Conference Finals is happening, whether it's the
Right.
Knicks or Atlanta in the next round. Again, I just don't think they're on the level of the Sixers because this is the deepest Sixers team. I've said it before on air too, that this is the best team in my lifetime. Not only is the starting five the most elite, but and look, I was born in 81, so 83 I didn't really consider my lifetime. That's one of the best teams ever. So, but they're deep. I mean, when Doc says they can go 10 or 11 in a playoff series, he's not joking. The fact that Tyrese Maxey is now, threatening to take Shake's minutes speaks to their depth and quality. And a guy like Furkan to come out and give you those situational, big buckets and threes, those are game changers. And then they have the best backup Joel's had in his time here in Philadelphia. And, it's just, and then Thibault, you can't say enough about that guy's defense and the impact he makes. So they're not only the best starting five I've seen in a long time, they're one of the best rosters I've seen in a long time. And they can go 10 or 11 deep, and that's scary for oppositions.
Let's wrap it up with one more from the pod line. And to that point, something that Joel talked about towards the end of the regular season that people don't discuss enough, the fit of this roster, especially the starting group when talking about this year versus last year. And I don't want to say it's only that, but I think it's a lot of that because it does make you recall like how things looked in flashes in 2018 and 2019 when JJ was here and there were some reserve shooters, whether it was a Bellinelli or an Ursan. Fit, I think, compared to last year, not to take anything away from like the people in and of themselves who were here last
Sure.
year, just fits better.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against Josh Richardson, but, they needed a three-point shooter last year, and I
Yeah.
thought Josh was on the doorstep of taking that next step in his perimeter game. It didn't really happen. And then Al Horford, the fact that you were able to get Danny Green for an Al Horford contract swap still doesn't really seem real to me that happened. But that those two guys, their style of play is the perfect fit to Ben and Joel. Ben and Joel, you almost have to keep away from each other on the court unless they're doing a two-man game, and then you have to give each of them their respect. So if it's Ben driving to the lane, you're going to have to probably double and collapse on him, thus leaving shooters open. The same goes with Embiid. As soon as he touches the ball, he's a threat anywhere on the court. So the only shot you have of stopping him is doubling him. And if you have shooters left open all around those two, I mean, it's not complicated. They should thrive, and they are thriving.
We appreciate all the callers. Per usual, we will be in touch to alert you about how we will get your swag to you. All right.
Get those
Playoffs,
get those
obviously,
people their swag, B-Celts.
they're going to be coming with pitchforks on the interweb in the mentions if they don't get it. We love it. We love to hook up those who help us.
Sixers have some great swag, man. I saw Doc with the new quarter zips last night.
Yes.
Caught my eye. Those are sharp.
I put this out there on Twitter. I don't think people are talking enough. And if no one's seen it, you can go back in and look at some of the walk-in photos on @Sixers. Joel's hoodie that he's rocked the last two games, it's just navy blue with a little Phila script in red across the chest and the front. But then the back is the huge Liberty Bell snake weaving through that looks
That's
like it
pretty
was
cool.
hand-stitched and sewed on. It might be a custom. I have to do some research.
I have a feeling that's from like Da Vinci in Paris. He sent over his prototype. No, but they got some great gear. They really do. And the new symbol and the snake and all that. It's so cool. And seeing the court for the
Yes.
when the playoffs open, that was just beautiful. You went, this is nice.
Lauren and I joke that one of her sub beats is the vibe check. I would say that my sub beat is the apparel check, the gear check. What's new?
I love the fashion runway into the game, and Alex Subers does a great job down there capturing it all. It cracks me up. Was it George Hill showed up in the cow kind of onesie looking jumpsuit thing, and I went, what the hell is that? But those guys put on their fashion runway show, man. It's cool.
I feel Danny Green flies a little bit. He shouldn't under the radar for some of his stylistic choices as well.
I always enjoy checking out what shoes they're rocking. Whether
Yes.
it's a fancy pair of loafers that probably cost more than my house, or just some like classic Jordan throwbacks or whatever it is. I always like checking out the footwear.
We're gonna have to do a drip deep dive, perhaps next time around,
Yeah,
a
definitely.
bonus
Count
edition.
count count me in.
All right, one last thing before letting you go. What changes in Game 5? Adjustments for the Sixers. Is it really about adjustments, or is it just cross your fingers, hope you get your best player back, and do what you do?
Yeah, I think my gut says Joel will play. I think that was just kind of one of those scary bone bruise. It's sore. We can afford to sit you out type of things. So I think he plays. And if he plays, nothing has to change. Just do what you do. If he doesn't play, I want to see that game 2 Ben Simmons where he's attacking the rim, and
Yes.
especially early, because if he does it early, it changes the rest of the game because nobody can really stop Ben to get into a point on the court. So if he establishes that early, it makes Seth's life easier, it makes Danny's life easier, and most importantly, it makes Tobias's life easier, because the Wizards are forced to give him that respect of collapsing down on him. So that would be the only change. I just say, hey, game 2, Ben, we need that again in game 5. If there's no Joel, if there's Joel, lights out, game over.
Well put. I think people who listen to this are sick of hearing me say this, but I feel like I'm all aboard on the aggressive Ben thing. But I think that, like we talk about closers for games,
Mm-hmm.
I view Ben as a starter, and I think the Sixers are great when Ben is out there, battering ram like force, opening up a game, setting the tone. I agree with you. I look for that as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, if you wanted to nitpick last night, those 48 seconds from 2:48 to 2 minutes, maybe you consider putting George Hill in there, so they can't off-ball foul Ben. But like we said, I think Doc viewed it as a long-term thing. Let's let him get the confidence of shooting his way out of this, and hopefully it'll pay off come Eastern Conference Finals. If somebody does that again, that was, the only slight nitpick from last night, but they'll be fine. This is over in 5.
I tend to agree.
Bring
Jamie Lynch,
on Atlanta?
bring on Atlanta, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think bring on Atlanta. Jamie Lynch, your mornings 6 to 10 on the Fanatic. This is great, my man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.